quick series of questions. How did he get to be 15 years old and in the 7th grade and not know how to read? But what I've come to understand is there are a lot of kids in the 7th grade who don't read very well. A lot of kids in high school who don't read very well. And it's really immaterial how they got there. They're there, and they're mine, and I need to do something about that. But the truth is, he got to 7th grade without reading because nobody dealt with the problems that he was having, and they just got worse year after year. My next question was, what materials do I use to teaching? Because all of the reading that I had was on a 7th grade level, or pretty close to it, so I didn't know what I would use to help him learn to read. My next question was, by the way, how do you teach reading? I was a middle school and high school teacher. Nobody had ever taught me how to teach reading, and I had no idea how to start. Just something told me I had to figure it out. I wondered whether I should put him someplace in the classroom so that he didn't sit near anybody and nobody would notice that he had a problem. Or whether maybe it would be better for me to talk to the class about the problem. I had no idea how to handle that. I had no idea how I would teach him and still try to teach all the other students. I couldn't figure out what they would do while I was working with him. I had no idea whether it was possible to take a boy who was 15 and didn't know how to read and help him become an important part of that class so that the kids thought he was important and so that he knew he was important in that room. I also had a very strange moment about a report card. And I thought to myself, okay, if I'm going to try to teach him to do better than he does now, I'm going to have to start where he is. But at the end of every marking period, somebody's going to expect me to fill out a report card for him. And if I follow the same grading that I've used with everybody else, what I need to say to him now is, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to work really hard to help you get better. But I need to tell you right now, you can't pass for the year. I hope you keep coming, and I hope you're enthusiastic, but you can't get a passing grade. Somehow that didn't seem right to me either, and I didn't know what to do about that. So over time, my colleagues and I did what I would like to invite you to do. And that is, we began to look at our students and look for their differences, not just to pretend that they were all alike, and that just because we had prepared a lesson and delivered it, that meant they would all learn it. We began to study their differences and to ask ourselves, do we do the best job of teaching when we always teach as though they were the same person? Or do we do a better job of teaching if we sometimes teach the whole class, but then sometimes have time where we can work in small groups or individuals and then bring them back together? And how would it look if we did that? So what I'm going to do with you today is give you a few thoughts about some of the conclusions that my colleagues and I drew, and some others that I have continued to think about once I moved from public school to the university. And by the way, for those of you who teach or who are planning to teach, what I know about differentiation, I learned in 20 years of teaching in public school. What I've done at the university is wonderful, and it helps me know things more deeply, but my real knowledge about teaching came from 20 years of teaching children who were from 3 years old through the end of high school. They're the ones who taught me by watching them and by seeing what worked with them. Let me start by just sharing with you for a minute a little bit of a thought about what differentiation is. I began to see it as a classroom practice where I looked eyeball to eyeball at my students and had to end up saying to them, you aren't all alike. And if I teach you as though you're all alike, I'm not teaching you as well as if I understood who you were and helped you on your own learning journey. So for me, differentiation requires me to see kids as individuals, to study how they're different and how they're alike, and to come to grips with what I believe differentiation then is responsive teaching. In other words, responding to the human beings that come to me, rather than just assuming that just because I say something, they're all going to process it successfully and in the same way. I like this image. It's one that a teacher drew when she came to a workshop on differentiation at the university where I teach. We asked the teachers as a pre-assessment to draw for us or write for us or explain to us on a chart in some way what they understood differentiation to be. And this teacher drew this diagram. She said, when I started teaching, I saw myself as the person whose job it was to make sure my students reach a designated learning destination. In other words, it's my job to get kids to achieve the goals they're supposed to achieve. She said, now that I've been working with differentiation for a few years, I still believe it's my job to help kids reach designated learning goals. But what I've come to understand is a few of my students will go straight there just like I thought they would. Some of my students I'll have to help get there this way, and some of my students I'll have to help get there this way. In other words, she's not suggesting different learning goals for every student, but rather that we develop different pathways to help students achieve whatever they should achieve. So for me, differentiation, one way of thinking about it is shaking up the instruction in my classroom, making it more flexible. And here are 3 ways that I can do that. And it's not a bad start just to think about these 3 as those of you who are studying education plan lessons, and as those of you who are in the classroom may decide that you have the flexibility to plan in slightly different ways. I have to provide information to students. Maybe it would be helpful if I asked myself, what are all the ways that this student could receive this information? Could she receive it through a demonstration?